missing acres from the USDA report. That's one of the issues we are going to discuss today with Mike Zuzolo. He speaks with us every Monday all about commodities, and he brings a very big picture about the macroeconomic status in the US. Mike, how are you today?
Fantastic, Louise. Thanks to USDA's report.
Yes, we always do a pre-production to our program, and Mike mentioned to me some missing acres from the USDA report. What's that about?
Well, it's the first time, Louise, in the 26 years that I've been doing this, that they have added a column called "Left to be Planted." It's not a game show. It's not a soap opera. It's an actual column on their report, and it was an acreage amount left to be planted based upon the 71,000 farmers that USDA surveyed in making the June acreage assessment. It was such a sizable and strange and new occurrence that I got in touch with the head of NASA's crop branch, USDA NASA's crop branch in Washington, D.C., and corresponded with him because the survey was done between the end of May and the middle of June 16. Well, by June 8th, NASA's weekly crop progress report showed about 95-96% of the corn had been planted. And by June, the following week, June 15th, soybeans were at 97% planted. So not only did they come in with a much smaller March acreage estimate, but they also went against their own crop progress report because of the planting pace that we had been under the understanding that we were making. And his explanation was simple. It was the survey of 71,000 producers overrode essentially the crop conditions and progress report and overrode the March acreage assessment. And therefore the 2.1 or 2.2 million corn acres that were still left to be planted and the 12.1 million acres of soybeans left to be planted, they did go ahead and put that into their planting data. So it's not as if we will see a big increase in soybean plantings, for instance, in the next month or two. That is something I was very worried about, but it looks as though that is not going to be the case. And because of that, I think it makes the weather that much more important here in the United States. And it makes what you and I've talked about when it comes to the tighter supplies of corn and beans in South America that much more important. So it really changed the whole dynamic of the supply-demand fundamentals for the world corn and bean stocks. One last point, if you drill down into the corn and bean acreage numbers, there's very little difference between harvested acres of corn this year and harvested acres of beans. USDA came in with 84 million acres harvested for corn and a little over 83 million acres for beans. So just 1 million acre difference between the two, which again is very, very odd. And so a weather market or poor inclement weather now would really, really mess the corn production potential up probably as much as the bean production potential.
Yes, and what we have anticipated many times on this program is that it will be very difficult for Iowa and Illinois and other parts of the Corn Belt to recover all of the crop. They are replanting. In some other areas, some more peripheral areas of agricultural production in the United States are getting drier. So it will be sort of a long shot to say that this will be a full crop. How do you assess, Mike?
The other thing that we're looking at here is the issue of when we see this kind of change by USDA, we're also going to see the potential for an increase in what I would call COVID-related buying ahead, that the demand side, the major importers of the world, if they become more nervous about a resurfacing and resurgence of COVID, and it damages our infrastructure again, it damages our supply chain, our transportation again, that may induce them to come in and give kind of a second wave of stockpiling, Luis. And I think that's something to watch for as well. So I think your point's very well made. And I think this is very important as we head into, in just a little over a week, the USDA's update on their world agricultural supply demand estimates, because wheat continues to be the biggest problem in oversupply. But it'll be interesting to see exactly what USDA gives us in light of what you're talking about and in light of Europe's wheat crop, and whether that even tightens the global supplies even more. And then that kind of comes back around and kind of feeds the bull if the weather is still an issue.
We are recording this prior to the holiday, so we have the full data about the US jobs report. So they released a number of 4.8 million jobs created during the month of June. The market expected about 3 million jobs. So how does that is going to affect the energy markets? I just saw the ethanol numbers that we are halfway to get to the numbers, to the pre-COVID-19 numbers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I will say also the supply numbers on ethanol keep dropping. So that's good because the demand numbers, the production numbers are not back to where they were. You make a really good point. The jobs numbers I'll tackle first, and I'll try to weave into that the trade deficit numbers as well, which came out to me. And those are probably just as important as the jobs numbers, both of them coming in favorable to the macroeconomy. And in terms of the jobs report coming in at 11%, that kept the dollar as a sell. And then the trade deficit came in at another widening of almost 10%. It is the widest we've been since December of 2018, I believe it was. The widest since December of 2018 at $54.6 billion deficit. But that December 18 deficit was also a 10-year wide deficit too. So that's a big number. And that also would suggest when you have exports going down faster than imports going up, and your deficit is increasing, your currency is too high. And that also put pressure on the dollar. So both of these reports, Louise, are kind of playing into the hands of that inflation mindset that you and I have been talking about. And we can't forget that the gold is sitting up around an 8 to 9 year high right now still after this week's trade. So a lot of nervousness about COVID resurging here in the United States and in India and some of the Latin American countries, especially Brazil and Mexico. But the trade is so far shrugging that off. And I think it's because of some of this economic data, and they're betting on the idea that a vaccine's right around the corner for COVID. So the demand side is holding up very, very well. But it is a very big concern of mine. That was the first thing I wrote about after talking about the acreage numbers by USDA was, does this mean we can stop selling as the market rallies? And I don't think so. I think we still need to stay protecting ourselves to the downside on rallies, putting floors in underneath us, and working very, very hard to take profitable per acre positions and locking in floors, especially because of the U.S.-China trade negotiations and this COVID resurgence. So it is truly a dance at this point to try and keep everything and juggling everything in the air. But I think the bottom line for me is supply helped us get a rally. It's still up to weather and supply at this point. While demand is recovering, it's not where it needs to be quite yet. And it could start to be damaged after July 4th between the driving and between the summer grilling season, what you bring up with the energy.
Yes, and that's where I'm going right now. We have been talking over and over again about the summer grilling season, and we are here right now. We are right on the pre-4th of July days, and as we are recording this, so was that what you expected for this time of the year?
No, my daughter works for our city, And the city of Atchison, Kansas is the birthplace of Amelia Earhart, the famous female aviator. And every year around July 4th, we have very big fireworks. We have a very big concert, and it is a very big deal. We get upwards of 100,000 people coming to a 10,000 people city. None of that is going to happen this year. And there are actually no public things going on this year. In the Wall Street Journal on Thursday, I read that Arizona's hospitalization rate for ICU, intensive care beds, is hitting around 89% capacity, and that was a new high. So states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida, which are very key, dense population, wealthy areas that people would vacation in, they're going backwards. And so I am concerned about the demand side of the equation very, very much.
Yes, and what about the demand side abroad from countries like China, Russia? So, are you optimistic about this demand?
Yeah, you know, we're in a time now with this weather rally and this supply rally that will start to ration demand by the sharp rally in prices at the mercantile exchange. So I don't look for our exports to pick up much, other than if we do have a second wave of COVID, whether we have a second wave of demand hoarding by major grain importers like the Philippines or Southeast Asian nations that need to feed a lot of livestock. They try and buy a lot, get it on the ocean, get it heading towards their countries before increased lockdowns occur if this COVID spreads again. That's, I think, very possible, but I think we're going to price ourselves out of the market for the most part, especially if we stay hot and dry. So it's going to be very tough to keep the same demand pace. That doesn't bother me as much as what's going on with the US-China frictions and what's happening with Hong Kong and what's happening with COVID, because that's more of a natural phenomenon in the market. And so when I see the Brazilian bean price at Paraná versus the Gulf of Mexico price here, that premium in Paraná has shrunk from about $16 or $17 a ton to down to, I think, $6 or $7 a ton after Thursday's close. That was in large part due to the Chicago pork price rally. So we are going to lose our competitive edge with this rally, but that bothers me less than the other things.
And do you think there will continue to be a shift in consumption from higher quality meat, more expensive meat, to cheaper meat like chicken?
Yeah, without a doubt, because we still have too high of an unemployment rate. And, those unemployment numbers were for last month. And we know that this month, with the resurgence in COVID, those unemployment numbers are probably going to shoot back up again. So I am very nervous about not getting those big cuts to be consumed. And that overall hurts the carcass value.
Mike, is there something else would you like to add, or are you too hungry?
You know what? I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all the listeners who've been following us, and we really appreciate you tuning in. And if you're in the United States, have a blessed Independence Day.